Avocado.
You are now listening to The Young God, a podcast for the gods. Hey Young Gods, I'm your host Rodney and thank you for tuning in to another episode of your favorite podcast. I hope you're enjoying the variety of content I've been putting out over the last couple of months. Season 3 has been a joy to work on, and I've tried to be as diverse and as unpredictable as possible, while still drawing a line that connects each episode to each other, and ultimately to the Young God idea. Today's episode is probably the most unexpected because it is about men who adore their women. Not put up with, not for the sake of peace, I mean adore. If you let women tell it, men hate them. That's their story and they're sticking to it. I can't blame them for feeling this way, to be honest. And it's weird because everything men do is to impress women, and yet we turn around and treat them like trash. It boggles the mind, doesn't it? Though women swear that men are misogynist scum, there are definitely exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about situations where a man goes above and beyond in a major way for the women in his life. And I have a story to back that up. It's a beautiful yet sad story that will make you feel some type of a way by the time you're done. It also coincides nicely with how we're currently talking about how men should do more to protect their women, stand with them in solidarity and show them that they are valued and appreciated. So, ladies and gentlemen, gather around as I take you back in time to 334 years before Christ, an age of epic heroes, a time when warrior kings personally fought on the front lines, surrounded by fanatical, highly trained bodyguards. Think of the TV show Spartacus or the movie 300. Let that set the scene. And without further ado, let us begin. Our story starts in the 4th century. During this period, a bitter rivalry had formed between two great personalities. I'm sure you might have heard of them. Alexander the Great of Macedonia and King Darius III of Persia. Alexander was known for his bravery in battle and his unwavering self-belief no matter the odds. Darius, his rival, was over 20 years older at the time, 42 I believe. He was more mature and less reckless than Alexander, but he also had that warrior mentality. He was always in the thick of bloody battle, but from his royal chariot. In this case, Alexander was the aggressor. He had just become king at the age of 20, and he desperately wanted to make a name for himself, as well as impose his will on the world. He had that Kanye-type ego and talent, a lethal combination in a man, let's not play. Oh, and he was broke. He assumed the throne at a time when Macedonia was severely in debt, so the only way to make money was by claiming Persian territory and Persian gold. That's how Alexander and Darius became fierce rivals. Now, due to the nature of politics at the time, theirs was a fight to the death. There could be no truce or no draw, and this was the 4th century. And right now we're in the 21st century, so that should put some perspective as to how long ago this was. On a normal day, Alexander shouldn't even be able to compete with Darius because the Persian army was famous for its unbelievable size. Do you remember how it was in 300? Just picture that. I mean, the sheer manpower at Darius's disposal should put the fear of God in any enemy. But Alexander was made different. He's called the Great for a reason, and you're about to find out. So what does this have to do with women? Stay with me, guys. This will all make sense in the end, I promise. What happened was, during their second clash, Darius and Alexander somehow found themselves within shouting distance of each other on the battlefield, which was where at the time, kings don't just appear face to face, eye to eye on the battlefield. They are usually at either end behind their armies and just, giving commands. But Alexander know the hear word. He loves to be in the thick of things, and somehow he and Darius found each other. In fact, they were so close that Darius was able to stab Alexander in the thigh with his dagger. Even still, Alexander caught the upper hand and was this close to capturing and killing Darius. Fortunately for Darius, he realized he had lost the momentum, and so he hopped on a chariot and fled the battlefield, causing the Persian forces to scatter, leaving behind, guess what? Or rather, guess who? Guess who he left behind? A whole Persian god king left behind his mother, wife, 2 daughters, and 6-year-old heir to the throne. Talk about grand prize, right? Now, I'm sure you're wondering why a king would bring his entire family to a bloody battlefield. Is it madness? What's the reasoning? Well, it was Persian custom that the one king brought his family with him to the battlefield to witness his victories. Talk about patriarchy, toxic masculinity, and fragile male ego. Whatever you want to call it, this is the equivalent of buying a sports car to overcompensate for a small penis. And this is where Darius fucked up. This was the beginning of all his problems. During that period, there were no rules of engagement in battle, so the victor could rape and pillage to their heart's content. Fortunately, Alexander was a clever and somewhat cultured man, so he ordered that the family of King Darius be well guarded and treated like the royalty that they are. They were far too valuable to harm. As for King Darius, the guy had been fleeing all night long, and it wasn't until he finally reached the gates of his city that he took stock of the situation, and it was then he realized that not only had he lost the battle and lost a boatload of territory and land, he had also left his mother, wife, and children behind at the mercy of his bitter rival. Darius analyzed the situation and decided that he was still in a position of strength. So he did the only thing he felt he could do. He decided to negotiate. This for me is where it gets interesting, because his advisors and generals saw this as a sign of weakness that he would put his family before national interest. But Darius would not let male ego trip him a second time. He would not let affliction fall him a second time. Persian code aside, it was the most reasonable thing to do. So King Darius proceeded to make Alexander an offer. In the offer, he reminded Alexander that he was the one that started shit. I was minding my own business and you came to take from me. How far, guy? Is it fair? You self reason am. Oh yeah, make we settle. Darius proposed that he would forgive everything, look the other way, and give him a hefty ransom. That's not all. Darius also generously offered all the territory and cities that Alexander had already conquered. As in, I won't be coming to reclaim what you took from me. Take it, I dash you, or I return my family. Basically, Darius made Alexander an offer he could not refuse. Or so you would think. After pondering the message for a very short time, as in, he didn't even sleep on it, Alexander gave the following reply. This is my favorite part by far. This is where you know what the hell Alexander is made of. I'm going to read out his response word for word. And I quote, King Alexander to Darius, in the future, let any communication you wish to make with me be addressed to the king of all Asia. Do not write me as an equal. Everything you possess is now mine. So, if you should want anything, let me know in proper terms, or I shall take steps to deal with you as a criminal. If, on the other hand, you wish to dispute the throne, stand and fight for it, and do not run away. Wherever you may find yourself, be sure I shall seek you out. Close quote. I need to sip some tea for this because, bruh, the effrontery, the male ego, the testicular fortitude of this young dude. If Darius had any doubt as to who he was dealing with before this, he certainly had none now. Alexander had cleared all doubt. It was at this point that Darius knew that this would be a battle to the death. Let's take a break. Now, welcome back to the show. Before you totally write off our dear Alex, let me properly explain Alexander's motivation. So you remember his response from before the break? Let me contextualize it for you. In the realm of power, if you want to make a name for yourself, you find the biggest, most powerful person and go at them. A sort of David versus Goliath situation. And that was exactly Alexander's aim. He was this small boy, young king from a poor nation who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And Darius was this excessively wealthy, powerful, like he had more wealth and resources than he knew what to do with. So he made him naturally the target for a man of Alexander's aim and vision. Alexander also knew his rival enough to know that Darius had been humiliated and he would not take to being humiliated again. Honor was at stake now more than ever. Being the David in this scenario, Alexander was hoping that Darius would vex as per blind rage and would raise another massive army to fight him so that he would publicly humiliate him once again on the global stage. He wanted to make a statement and Darius was not ready. And oh, the story isn't over, not a chance. This is where I was actually touched by Darius and his love for the women who were held captive. So, fast forward to some nights before their final battle. Word reached Darius that his wife, who had been in captivity for 2 years now, had died, either in childbirth or during a miscarriage. History is unclear about the details, but what we're clear about is that Darius was heartbroken. He was beset with grief. I mean, can you feel his pain? Right? Because in the first instance, he did everything he could to get his woman back, and now he's lost one of them. And just who had made her pregnant was anybody's guess. But knowing Alex, bad boy Alex, chai. Anyway, for me, this is where I put Darius up there as a real man. Because even as Alexander's forces approached for their final battle, even though he had all the advantage in the world to make an example out of Alexander, Darius made one final, humble, secret offer to secure the release of his mother and daughters. This was the proposal. If Alexander would return his mother and daughters, he could have the hand of one of his girls of his choice in marriage, as well as 30,000 talents, which is the equivalent of Bill Gates' money today. He could also have his young son as a permanent hostage, his heir, his only male child. Think about that. He was willing to sacrifice his only heir to the throne. And then finally, to show his generosity, he was willing to give up territory the size of Russia. And if you know what Russia looks like on a map, you know that that's not beans. Guys, Darius was prepared to sacrifice his only heir and 3/4 of his kingdom for his mother and daughter's safe return. Let that sink in. If that is not love for the women in your life, I don't know what is. Alexander's general, Parmenio, told him, Alexander, man, if I were you, I would accept this offer. Just imagine Alexander's response. He said, so would I, if I were you, Parmenio. And I ain't. Gosh, Alex no dey hear word. Habba. Alexander rejected Darius' offer without even a second thought. A testament to his desire to reach his goal and his youthful exuberance. You know, when you're 22 years old, 23, you just want to do the most. But he hadn't yet seen the Persian forces that were now assembling at the final battlefield, because if he had, history says he surely would have taken that deal. If this was a TV show, you would expect Alexander to lose this final battle in the most horrific way after all that he had put Darius through. Think Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones. But oh no. Alexander, with his much smaller army and superior strategy, was able to defeat Darius at the last minute. Alexander had, 40,000 men, and Darius had 200,000 men. That means that King Darius's army had the advantage of 5 men to 1. And still, Alexander was able to win that battle. At the last minute though, Rhonda Rhimes or Game of Thrones writers couldn't script this ending. And while it might seem that Alexander was a thoughtless brute, he was actually extremely brilliant at mind games and military strategy. But his most important attribute, and the one that he's most remembered for, was in many situations, he's able to think fast when the chips are down, like when the odds are against him, like when to do or die. He's Kobe with the shot, basically. And that's essentially what saved his life during his final battle with Darius, because there was a point during the battle that the sheer number of the Persian army overwhelmed all his strategy. But in the last moment, he was able to spot an opening that led him right to King Darius, who, again, fled the battlefield. And it was at that point that the 200-year Persian Empire was over. A 22-year-old man changed all of history forever. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why he's called great. But that's not what this is about. As epic as that is, the main thing for me was how King Darius cared for and loved his women in an age when it was seen as weakness. Granted, he shouldn't have succumbed to the pressure and brought them to the battlefield, but he did. But still, it's just unheard of that a whole king would put women ahead of the national interest, ahead of power and glory. He failed his family, his country, and himself. And for what? He lost it all and died a lonely, painful death at the hands of his treacherous cousin, who hoped to get a reward from Alexander. And you can trust Alexander, he was not having it at all. He had the traitor executed because, according to him, only a king was fit to kill a king. So to the last moment, Alexander still was just doing the fucking most. But man, life was rough in the 4th century. Take what you will from all of this. I just think it was a good story. It keeps me up at night, just the sheer drama of it all. I'm sorry that there wasn't a happy ending for Darius and his women, but it reminds us that being good or having good intentions in this life does not guarantee success. Sometimes, those who want it more are the ones who win. This is the Young God. If you made it to the end of this episode, you're a real one. Thanks again for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, there's a whole lot more where that came from. Just scroll down, you'll see all the range of topics, guests, stories, whatever. I've put in some work for you guys, so there's something for everyone. I release episodes every Saturday at midnight, and depending on my mood, I might release 2 or 3. You know, I can be generous like that. So don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you feel so inspired. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and follow the podcast on Instagram at The Young God Pod and Twitter at I Am The Young God for exclusive content. And just, we're in this, man. Thanks again. Rodney Amakache, out.